Hi, everybody. We're just going to give a couple of minutes here for some folks to join us. If you're on the East Coast or in the Eastern time zone, it's lunchtime. If you're out west, could be a late breakfast. We'll get started in a couple minutes. Get started in about 50 seconds here. Time to grab that cup of coffee like I did, or maybe something else to drink. Make sure you have something to take notes. A recording of the webinar will be available to everybody who registered afterwards. You'll also get the slide deck and all the handouts. We'll talk more about those in a few minutes. All right, let's get started, everybody. Welcome to the WordWrite webinar, How Complex Businesses Use Storytelling to Drive Growth. I'm Paul Fariga, the President and Chief Storyteller at WordWrite. I'm your host and your presenter for today's webinar. My highly talented colleagues, Adam Stieber and Trey Adams, are with me as well. They'll be running the chat. If you have any questions or comments you'd like to make throughout the webinar, please feel free to share them. And Trey or Adam will let me know what's on your mind. We're happy to answer questions as we go along the way. Let's get started. These 4 words in most cultures carry impressive power. Frequently, when we do presentations, when I speak on the storytelling topic, I'll begin by asking participants in a workshop or a live event to consider their earliest memory of these 4 words. All the way back, to paraphrase Chris Berman, to your childhood. What images, what sounds, what experiences come to mind when you consider once upon a time? I get great answers. Lots of childhood memories. Why would we start there today, as we often do? Because those memories demonstrate the power of stories and storytelling. Because we can go all the way back to the very beginning of our conscious memories and associate some story experience with these words, once upon a time. That demonstrates the power of story, and not just the power of story in our lives, but for those of us who are participating in this webinar as business leaders, the power of stories in business. Frequently, people will say to me, okay, Paul, right, I know lots of great companies that share great stories. And in fact, on the screen here are several great brands that have wonderful stories and do a great job of sharing those stories. Frequently, when I speak or I present on this topic, I will use some of them as examples. Here's the thing, though. At our firm, our focus is not on working with companies like Southwest or Disney or Harley Davidson. It's on working with providers of complex services. You'd be surprised. You may think that the best stories belong to these companies. Surprise. Research shows, and by the way, this is not new research, it's almost 10 years old. B2B brands drive more emotional connections than B2C brands, according to this research study that was done by Google and CEB. And I've underlined and highlighted here. Those are my notations. That last sentence. On average, B2B customers are significantly more emotionally connected to their vendors and service providers than consumers. What does that tell us as business leaders? It tells us if you're in a B2B business, you need to spend more time, more attention on your story than a well-known consumer brand. By the way, that's a hot link here. You're going to get the slides from the webinar afterwards. You'll be able to click through to the actual study and see for yourself why B2B stories are so important. Now, don't just take my word for it. You know, at WordWrite, our work and our process, which we'll talk about a little bit later, is infused by several well springs of thought. One of them is Simon Sinek, great author and speaker. This is from his very first talk, the talk that kind of made him. It was a TEDx talk way back in 2009. And this is one of the things he said during his presentation. People don't buy what you do. They buy why you do it. What you do simply proves what you believe. In other words, what you do demonstrates your worldview as a business, your take on your industry, your value proposition. Once again, that's a hot link there. You can go and watch his entire 2009 talk if you'd like. You know, when we think of stories as business leaders or just as human beings, consumers of popular culture, Pixar stands tall, doesn't it? What great storytelling, so many great films, right? Andrew Stanton, as a writer, a director, a producer, has been associated with so many of those great films. He also gave a fantastic TED Talk. I highly recommend it to you, and the hot link is there. It was all about story. The greatest story commandment, according to Andrew Stanton, make me care. Please, emotionally, intellectually, aesthetically, just make me care. Hey, sorry folks, we've been in business for 2 decades. I've been in communications for 4 decades. Far too many B2B brands, far too many B2B companies. Who cares about what we do? Why do we spend time on something? It's technical, it's complex. Wrong, 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 wrong. Make me care. And in this instance, the me is the audience that's most important to you. It might be prospects, it might be customers, it might be potential employees, investors. We'll talk more about that in a few minutes. Make me care. B2B stories, much more important than B2C stories. All right, let's talk about you a little bit. Are you in the right place by being in this webinar? Yes. If you provide complex services, in other words, you do something like you're an expert at accounting, financial services, law, engineering, technology, healthcare. Second, the folks who hire you, they may be smart, but not about what you do. They don't know as much as you do. That's why they hire you. And therefore, you must explain your value by sharing your story to somebody who may be very smart in a way that's unique, compelling, and memorable so that they're comfortable hiring you and paying you. Because remember, bullet number 2, they may be smart, but they don't know as much about what you do as you do. And if you want them to sign the agreement and sign the checks, you need to share a narrative story about your value that they understand so that they're willing to hire you. Now, in 2 decades of doing this, we've also learned that our greatest value and the greatest value of uncovering, developing, and sharing your story comes when you're experiencing any one, or heaven forbid, all of these issues. Maybe your sales are a little stuck. They're inconsistent. You can't really predict when one year is going to be better than another, except if you look at really macro events like recessions and such. You know, you're running this company and you're just not happy with the way people inside and outside the company are talking about it. The messaging's inconsistent. Maybe you're doing sales or marketing and you're just frustrated. You talk to prospects and customers, maybe you do research, and they keep telling you they don't see any difference between you and your competitors. You may be spending a lot of money on marketing, and if you're not getting results, how frustrating is that? What are we in right now? The Great Resignation, the Great Retention? I'm not really sure. All I know is so many companies that we work with, and I'm sure many of you today, are experiencing difficulty hiring and retaining talent. I guarantee you this, whatever industry you're in, whatever the size of your organization, there's somebody who can pay people more, your people more, the people you want to hire. So that's not how you're going to win the war for talent. Research shows millennials, Gen Z, who now make up the bulk of the workforce, they are driven by working for companies that have a purpose. Simon Sinek's latest book, The Infinite Game, he calls these just cause companies. You're not just working for a paycheck, you're working to make a difference. How do you demonstrate that you are making a difference? You share your story. Well, holy cow, what if you really don't have a strategy for what your marketing is doing? Maybe we can help you out. Little key learnings today. What if you don't know what the return on investment is for your marketing? Or it's non-existent. Now, ideally, if you're in this webinar and you're experiencing any of these, you're higher up the food chain here than at the bottom. But believe me, what we're going to talk about during the remainder of our time together in this webinar will address any one of these pain points. You're also in the right place if you want to come out of the experience of being in this webinar by having a better understanding of how to create alignment on how folks talk about your company, to get clarity on how important audiences perceive your organization, to get confidence that whatever you're spending on marketing and sales is helping you drive sales. And if you're a C-suite leader, if you are leading a major function in an organization, you need measurable results. Having a unique, compelling, and memorable story is the best way to drive those results. All right, so that's a little bit about you. Let's talk a little bit about your story. Now, there's a very specific kind of a story that we're focused on in our work as a firm, and I would argue that you should be focused on in your daily work at your organization. That is this concept we call a capital S story. Now, what we know from our work is every day, every week, every month, every year, business leaders share lots of stories. How to get something from point A to B today. How to drive results in a quarter. Why somebody should buy a specific product at a specific time. Those are small S stories because they are more tactical and driven more by episodic events. Your capital S story gets that big S because it stands above all the others. It answers 4 fundamental questions. Why someone would buy from your organization, work for you, invest in you if that's important to you, or partner with you if that's important to you. Capital S. The answers to those questions define the very character and nature of your organization. And that's the story that we're focused on today. Okay, Paul, what are some examples of these stories? These are not the only kinds of capital S stories that you will find in business. They are common, though. It might be about how your company got started. It might be about a dream or a passion that your organization has to make a difference. It might be about an innovation, a product or a service that you came up with. It might be that your organization has been on the front end for a long time, and finally the market is ready for whatever it is you do, a coming of age. Or it could be, I often think of 3M, which accidentally invented Post-it notes when they were trying to do something else. It could just be an epiphany, right? Now, these aren't the only kinds of capital S stories. Your organization may be living one of these capital S stories right now, or maybe a different one. That's not what's important. What's important is you have a capital S story, and you need to know it and share it to drive the best possible business results. People often say to me, well, Paul, okay, capital S story. Once I know what that story is, where does it go? Well, number one, in B2B, your digital storefront, your website, it especially needs to be on the homepage. And I would challenge all of you who are watching this webinar, not now, but when we're done, take a look at your website. Is that story there on your homepage? It's got to be throughout your website, frankly, but the two most important places are the homepage and your about page. Man, that page is hit so often. We have statistics to show it. People like what you say about yourself, and they think, okay, who are these people? Why would I want to work with them? And they take a look at the about page. But don't stop there. It needs to be in your company LinkedIn profile, the LinkedIn profiles of the leadership of the organization. This is especially true in organizations like law firms or accounting firms or engineering firms, where your clients are buying your thought capital. They're buying the thinking of the principals. Your story needs to be there too. Press release boilerplates. This is the paragraph. This is the bottom that says about the company. It shouldn't be a bunch of keyword stuff nonsense. It should be your story. Same with your social media profiles, your bio on Instagram, right? Twitter, et cetera, et cetera. Your YouTube channel, which by the way you should have. Your sales materials, those that live on your website or in electronic communications, those that might be printed. How about the scripts that your sales folks are using when they're talking to prospects? That's where your story needs to be. And of course, as we talked about a little bit earlier, it also needs to be in all of what I'll call your talent communications. How are you talking about the value of your organization to your current employees as well as future employees? Critically important that they're getting the sense of your capital S story in those communications. This is a webinar about how complex businesses use storytelling to create success. So we've got 3 examples we're going to share with you today, kind of whet your appetite, and we're going to talk a little bit about how you can start to uncover your capital S story. Let's dig in. First and foremost, a B2B company can use their story as an introduction. Many, many times we've worked with companies, and by the name alone, which is another problem that we can talk about later, maybe they can't tell what the company does. Maybe they're even wrong about the company. There's a company that we're working with right now out west, and they do microwave communications. And so they have the word microwave in their name. Do you know how many times a day people come up to them and say, I need a new microwave for my kitchen? Wrong kind of microwave. So it's okay if people don't know what you do in the beginning. You can even actually have fun with that. I'm going to show you that in the example here in just a second. Sharing your story, I mean, that's how you're going to be remembered compared to your competition. The example I'm going to show you here in a second has a really good sense of perspective. Let's take a look at it. Bear with me here. I am going to switch out to a video. So here we go.
Who we're not. Let's start here. We're not in shipping. We don't make lifts. Seriously, no lifts. We do this. We're good at this. And we make all of these. And even though you'll find us here and here, we don't make energy. We make you save it. And you'll be saving the environment too. Are we an internet company? Well, we connect and power just about everything around you, helping machines talk to each other and to you, making your world more personal. We're seeking out the big questions and answering them honestly. Like, how can we make the most of our energy and resources? Or can we make access to energy and digital basic human rights? We're real people, employees, developers, partners, investors, and inventors, all passionate about doing what's right. We're open, humans of all sorts from all over, learning from each other and about each other. We're not here to save the world. It'll go on with or without us. We're here to be your digital partner for sustainability and efficiency to ensure life is on everywhere for everyone at every moment.
Okay, so that is Schneider Electric, a company that maybe some of you have heard of, and I'll bet a lot of you hadn't. I just love their Life is On campaign. By the way, one of the handouts that we will share with you in the chat a little bit later on will have links to the full campaign for all the examples I show you, as well as other links. What I was saying about perspective, though, I mean, towards the end of this video, hey, we're not going to change the world. I mean, they're honest about who they are, right? I also love the sense that they have right at the beginning. It's more the British word, lifts, rather than, in the States we call them elevators. But still, we don't make elevators. They must have done some research, and a fair number of people must think they make elevators. I don't know. But I think it's nice how they just sort of acknowledge that up front. You may think we do this, but we don't. There's a full campaign. You'll get links to it at the end of today's webinar. Second example, the story brings the company to life. Now, I've been challenged on this sometimes, but I have to tell you, sometimes seeing really is believing in B2B. Some of the things that B2B companies are really cool, and until you see them in action, you don't really understand how they work, right? That's where social media can be such a great storytelling platform for B2B companies. B2B companies, they're just rarely seen. So sharing your capitalist story and that kind of environment can be revealing. And in the example I'm going to show you, and again, there's an entire campaign that this company has done. There's a sense of humor, and some of the music is not of my era, but I'll say that in terms of picking the platforms and the soundtracks, maybe they've done a good job. And that company is Maersk. Let me share a short video with you.
Seconds.
When I walked in the club, everything changed when I walked in the club. He was looking at me like, wow, the aura of my body, I dropped in that club. So he says, I heard you're a singer. I live in a penthouse, it's on the east side. I can tell what he implied. I don't just make decisions I make after midnight. That's like, he keep call this new bitch mainstream. Toxic, hypnotic. Grab a couple balls from his wallet. His photos naked, no bitch, nigga face gold plated. WordWrite in his new Mercedes. You still want me to have your babies?
Okay, I'm hoping that you folks can hear me. I seem to be a little bit frozen on the screen here on my end, but we'll see if we can't power through that here. We can hear, okay, you can hear me. Sometimes hearing me is better than seeing me. So, all right. So let me give you a third example here. We talked about introducing the company, bringing the company to life. Third, let's talk about evolving your story to stay current. Now, there are many great B2B companies in the world who've been around for a while. And, what they did in the beginning is not what they're doing today. Their capital S story becomes a critical tool that enables them to share the evolution of their story. Some of you may not know what that is on the screen there. That is an IBM personal computer, which was one of the first personal computers. I will tell you that I actually had one of those IBM personal computers. They were more expensive in today dollars than computers you can buy today, surprisingly enough. That's not what IBM does today, though, right? Watson is the future of IBM today. It's artificial intelligence. So how are you going to bring that story to life? Well, how about have Watson compete on Jeopardy? And there's Ken Jennings there, who's one of the current co-hosts. I'm noticing that he was not willing to wager as much as Watson was on getting the right answer here, which is maybe an interesting commentary. Regardless, this is how they brought the story to life, right? So A story can evolve over time. In fact, it should. Even if you're not a book reader, this is one way to think of your capital S story like a book. It has chapters as things change. All right, so let's talk a little bit about some tools to help you begin uncovering your capital S story. I'm going to give you 3 ways to do that. Number 1, and Trey, if you can hear me, this is the point where we can drop the first handout, Finding Your Capital S Story, into the chat pane. All right. Can you guys see me all right? Somebody give me a thumbs up there in the private chat. I think you probably can. Thank you. Thank you, Maggie. Appreciate that. Okay, so this will get you started. This is obviously, we're putting the webinar on. We're going to talk a little bit about ourselves, just a little bit. This is primarily educational, maybe entertaining, ideally informative. When we do our trademark storytelling process, which is called story crafting, one of the first things we do is get the leadership team in the room and we give them a version of this worksheet. And we ask them the 4 questions. Write down the answers to the 4 questions. You know what? The leadership is often not on the same page, and great ideas come up. Example, in this time of challenge in hiring, the story that the HR leader might be telling for the organization could be of interest to other people in the organization. The CEO, maybe sales, maybe marketing. I mean, that's a tough competition, the competition for talent. So this is an important way to get everybody who's leading the organization on the same page. It surfaces raw material to develop your capital S story. Number 2, what if you thought about your company as if it were a person? Get the leadership in the room again. Ask them, if we were a person, who would we be? Now, one of the things we do in our work is we develop what we call archetypes. As an example, if you said to me, Paul, I heard you got a new client, and I said, yes, it's a David and Goliath story. You don't have to be a biblical scholar to know David versus Goliath is the underdog story, right? So what sort of archetype or person might your company be? If you can't think of that off the top of your head, what are the demographics that define you? What's your worldview? How do you like to interact with your clients or your customers? What are those interactions like? Second way to look at it. Third way to look at it. Try metaphors or similes. And these are just prompts. We have a lot of writers on our team, and one traditional writing exercise is to give you a prompt. Imagine a situation. In a business context, to develop your capital S story, our firm reminds me of what? Our company is like what? If only our firm were more or less. In comparison to our competitors, our company is A and our competitor is B. Again, these are to help you surface ideas to start to uncover your capital S story. And again, participating in the webinar today, you're going to get a PDF of all the slides, so these examples will be there for you to look at. Now, we put on this webinar, why do we care about your story and what do we do? Allow me to explain. Number 1, we wrote the book. It's called Finding Your Capital S Story, Why Your Story Drives Your Brand. And at the end of today's webinar, you'll have the opportunity to download a sample chapter from the book. Number 2, as I just referenced, we developed a trademark process to help you uncover, develop, and share your story. It's called story crafting. Now, we've been around for a little while, 2 decades, so we've had a lot of success with other companies developing, infusing the concept of story into what we do for them. And we have great storytellers on our team, including several journalists. And in my own personal case, I spent 20 years in journalism. I figured it out one time. I wrote about 10,000 stories and edited another 10,000. You know, that's a lot of beginnings, middles, and ends, right? Yeah, I was with people in the best of times and the worst of times. Really learned a lot about what constitutes great storytelling. And that's what we apply to our work every day with our clients. More specifically, and props to Lisa and Adam on our team and Dan and a few other people, this comes from one of our marketing materials. Our process is called story crafting. As you can see on the screen there are typically 4 primary reasons why folks reach out to us. These are some of the same reasons we talked about earlier today in the webinar, right? Stuck or inconsistent sales, you're unsure that you're getting the right return on your investment. Maybe you got something new, a new product or service you want to market, right? Why does story crafting work? All the way back to the beginning today, that childhood memory, once upon a time. There's tons of research now. The last 20 years, MRIs and other brain imaging tools have allowed us to understand that when a great story is shared, the audience locks in with the storyteller sharing the story. In fact, as it says here on the screen, the audience begins to anticipate what's coming next. Wouldn't you love in your organization or your clients or prospects to be anticipating the next great thing you can do for them? Think about it. Speaking of thinking about it, from what we've shared today, I'd like to ask you, what is your capital S story? Do you know what it is? And if you do, is that story driving your brand? Which is to say, is that story the fuel that's powering your marketing and sales? And why or why not? I'm not a hammer salesman. I'm not going to tell you that no matter what problem you have, you need a hammer, okay? So our take on this is story crafting and the capital S story. Maybe you think that doesn't apply to you. That's okay. But ask yourself, why or why not? If you have a good understanding of that answer, mission accomplished. We've shared with you in this webinar valuable information. Trey, you can share this handout in the chat pane, please. We have put together, and again, this will be available to download afterwards for those of you who are watching the webinar later. This is our marketing checklist. This will give you an idea of how your story is measuring up. So for those of you who are with us live, you can download that in the chat pane. For those of you who are watching this later, this will be available on the downloads page. And now, if you aren't sure of the answers on that handout that we just shared, I'd be happy to connect with you by phone or video and talk it through. I did write a book on this topic. We've been doing this for decades. I mean, there's way more that we can share that might be useful to you than we can cover in a 1 hour or less webinar. So we'd be happy to get together with you and have a conversation and provide additional resources that help you uncover, develop, and share your own capital S story. Now that's the end of the deck, and at this point, Trey, you can put the last handout in there. We also have a third handout. It's key takeaways from today. Again, this will also be available on the downloads page. This particular handout will have live links to the video campaigns I talked about today, et cetera, et cetera. As well, you'll see there's hot links here to learn more about the book if that interests you, to learn more about our story crafting process, to learn about some companies we've worked with to help them uncover, develop, and share their great stories. And the bottom link there, that's the main link if you really want to write it down, that'll take you immediately to the downloads page for everything we've talked about so far today. It was a goal of mine today to leave plenty of time for questions. And I think I've succeeded on that score. And at this point in time, Adam and Trey, I'd be happy to answer any questions that have come in from the audience. All right. How do I identify, there's one question, how do I identify the best storytellers in my organization? This is a great question. And there are three principles that we look for in a great capitalist story. One is that it's authentic, that it's rooted in truth. Secondly is that you have fluent storytellers. And third is that you continually engage the audience so that you're certain you're driving results. Now, with regard to fluent storytellers, the example I often give is healthcare. Typically, in business, when we think about an organization, and certainly a B2B manufacturing organization, who's the best storyteller? Well, I don't know. Who's at the top of the food chain? The CEO, right? Well, guess what? That's not always the best storyteller. Maybe in a tech company, the storyteller shouldn't be the professional who's well running the company. It should be the person who invented the product or service. In a healthcare organization, if I need to have surgery and I'm trying to evaluate my options, do I want to talk to the CEO of the hospitals, or do I want to talk to the doctor and the caregivers who are going to provide the services to me? Obviously, I want to talk to those folks. So identifying the best storytellers in your organization is determined by the kind of a story that you're sharing. And the best people to share that story are the most believable storytellers, the ones who have the best perspective on the topic at hand. And again, the example from healthcare would be caregivers. If you are talking about sharing a particular service or procedure. Other questions? Here's another question. My company is large. How do I ensure consistency across the board when communicating our story internally as well as externally to prospective clients? That's a great question. And the answer is by developing a cadre, if you will, of fluent storytellers. The example that I give most often comes from one of the companies we identified at the very beginning of today's webinar, and that's Nike. Nike has this class of individuals inside the company, and it's very prestigious to become one of these people. They're called Ekins, E-K-I-N-S, and that is actually Nike spelled backwards. Now, in another company, these people might be referred to as regional sales managers or district sales managers or something like that. But at Nike, they are corporate storytellers. If you're selected to become an Ekin, you go through a 2-week boot camp in Oregon. You visit the headquarters of Nike. You go to the University of Oregon track where one of the co-founders, actually two of the co-founders, Phil Bowerman, the legendary Oregon track coach, and Phil Knight, who is known for so many years as the iconic CEO of Nike, actually ran track. You see a number of other places and events that are related to the history of Nike. In fact, at Nike, employee number 4, a guy named Nelson Ferris, for more than 3 decades, had the title of chief storyteller. And as chief storyteller, his job was to work with new employees to understand the corporate story, to understand that Nike is more than the swoosh. It is the story of a company created by runners to create world-class accessories and equipment so that people could do a better job of running. Obviously today, for those of us who like Nike apparel, we are not going to challenge Tiger Woods or Michael Jordan in their respective sports, right? But we become part of the story. If I'm a weekend warrior, when I buy Nike shoes or accessories or apparel, I am joining the story. Yes, I'm a weekend warrior. I'm not going to set a world record time for the marathon, right? But I'm part of that story. And that's the difference. And that is kept alive, nurtured, grown by this class of fluent storytellers inside the company. Other questions? All right. Let's check one more pane here. Okay. Well, I want to thank you all for being here today, whether you're watching us live or you're watching us later. Please take advantage of the opportunity. As you see here on the screen, if there's more information we can provide for you, you'll see there's my email address and contact information. There is the download page for everything we've shared today. And as well, if you just want to check us out, wordwriteagency.com. We just recently redid our website. I think our team did a fantastic job with that. I hope you agree with me that our website shares our capital S story as well as we would like it to. All right, folks. Thanks so much for being here today. Really appreciated your time.